My name is Igor Siddiqui, Associate Professor here at the School of Architecture. It's a pleasure to have Andrew Kudless here with us today. Andrew is Associate Professor of Architecture at the California College of the Arts and founder of Matsys in San Francisco. Andrew, I just wanted to ask you a few questions as a pretext for your lecture here this evening.
Great.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between the digital and the material in your practice?
Yeah, I go back and forth between digital and material all the time in my practice. I often will start with a physical model, some kind of testing of some material, and then try to model that behavior within the computer, or the other way around, where I definitely don't try to do everything digitally until the last minute and then try to get somehow out of the computer into reality. I find it really productive to kind of constantly be kind of sketching both digitally and physically with materials, with drawings, so forth.
Okay. So recently you completed a project here in Texas at Confluence Park in San Antonio. Congratulations on that. It's a big step for an emerging practice to have a permanent work of architecture out there in the world.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of impact that that experience has had on your practice, which is known as an experimental practice, and maybe even how it is influencing your teaching? So just what has that experience kind of yielded in terms of your insight or revelations maybe?
That's a good question. I'm definitely still trying to figure out some of that. And that, I mean, one of the, I guess, insights that I've had since doing the project was earlier on, before doing like a bigger public project like this, I was more worried about how my skills would translate. You know, after working as an architect for many years and then going to doing more like installation scale kind of experiments and things like that, I was somewhat worried about how I could kind of translate my skills back into the profession. And one of the things that I learned that I thought was interesting was, in some ways, the construction industry hasn't changed all that much since I was kind of practicing in the late 90s, early 2000s. And things that I was proposing that I thought were fairly regular, like CNC milling something or water jet cutting something, nothing fancy with like robots or anything. They were like, the contractor was just kind of, we haven't done that before on a project. And so it was really interesting to kind of work with them and work through some of these technologies and realize that like using some of these new technologies, or even not so new technologies, actually made the project a lot cheaper. And that was something new for them, where, for instance, we originally went in thinking, or at least the contractor went in thinking they were going to do the formwork out of kind of traditionally constructed plywood. And I was really worried about that because I thought there's no way the accuracy would be good enough, and it wouldn't hold up to multiple pours and things like that for the concrete. And in the end, it was many times more expensive to use the traditional method than to use the digitally fabricated method. So I guess what I've learned is that what I thought there was maybe more of a divide in a way, and that I thought my skills wouldn't translate as well. I'd be kind of, but in the end, I think the industry is ready for it and kind of hungry for it, and it's now actually cheaper to kind of use some of these new technologies.
That's very interesting. And knowing you as a person and the way that your work and the work of Matsys is often discussed, there's always a link to craft.
Definitely.
And this is something as a word or as a term that comes up a lot, especially in teaching with students, and certainly in the realm of fabrication and its transformation through digital technology. Would you like to say anything about the role of craft in the digital age, both for students and in practice?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, although it sounds odd, you know, digital craft, like they sound like polar opposites in a way, but I think that craft is usually associated with the making of physical things, and the digital is usually associated with more of the virtual. And I even outside of digital fabrication, I still think there's a craft to using a computer, even if you're not making anything. I think in the same way that like writing is a craft, or singing or any other kind of art or design, that there's a certain level where a combination of aesthetics and the materials of that craft, whatever it might be, and by materials, I think it can be very broad. It doesn't have to just be physical things. It could be language, for instance, or whatever. But there's a certain, I'd say, like technical skill that like a craftsperson gains or needs to produce their work. And then finally, and this goes back to people like David Pye, the furniture maker, but associated with craft, there's also a level of risk. The difference between craft and like production, mass production. Like in mass production, you're trying to rule all risk out of the process. And that craft, there's always an element where the thing could just break. You're just right on the edge, whatever it might be. It might be a grasshopper file, or it could be a paper, it could be a piece of carpentry, whatever it might be. But with craft, there's something where you're not quite sure if it's going to work. You haven't ruled out all risk, and that's, I think, where innovation occurs.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.